Snowflakes drifted through the silent forest as Officer Mark pushed deeper into the frozen woods. Answering a call no one wanted to believe, locals reported strange shapes hanging between the trees, shapes that looked like animals. At first, he thought it had to be a prank, until Rex, his canine partner, froze. The dog's ears shot up, his body tensed, and a low, trembling whine escaped him. And then Mark saw them. 10 German shepherds, tied upright to the trees, motionless, their fur coated in frost, their eyes half open. But when Mark stepped closer, one of them blinked. What he uncovered next would spark the largest investigation his department had ever seen, and shake the entire nation. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. Snow hammered the quiet mountain highway as Officer Mark Dalton adjusted the heater in his patrol truck, trying to fight off the bitter cold creeping through the windows. Most winter mornings were calm, uneventful, predictable. But the shaky voice that came through dispatch minutes earlier shattered that routine. A lone hiker, breathless and terrified, claimed he had seen dogs hanging from the trees deep in the northern woods. At first, Mark thought he misheard. Dispatch replayed the recording, and the fear in the caller's voice was unmistakable. Something was very wrong. Mark glanced at his partner, Rex, sitting alert in the passenger seat. The German shepherd sensed the tension instantly, ears perked, eyes sharp through the flickering dashboard lights. "Easy, boy," Mark murmured, though his own heartbeat was unsteady. Rex rarely reacted this intensely unless danger was real. The truck's tires crunched over snow as they left the main road and turned down a narrow forest path. The deeper they went, the darker it became. Tall pines swallowed the weak daylight, creating an eerie tunnel of white and shadow. The wind howled through the branches like a warning. Dispatch came through again. "Officer Dalton, caller claims he saw multiple animals, possibly injured. He couldn't confirm if they were alive." Mark tightened his grip on the steering wheel. "Copy that," he responded, though unease crawled across his spine. Animals hanging from trees. Who would do something like that, especially in these temperatures? At 20 degrees below freezing, any living creature wouldn't survive long. Rex suddenly shifted, pressing his nose against the window, tail rigid. Something out there had caught his attention. Mark slowed, scanning the woods, but saw only darkness. "We're close," he whispered. The forest pressed in around them, silent and unforgiving, like it was hiding a secret it wished no one would uncover. Mark parked at the trailhead, snow blowing sideways across his boots as he stepped out. He clipped Rex's leash, took a deep breath, and shut the truck door. "Show me what you've got, buddy." And together, they disappeared into the frozen woods toward a discovery that would change everything. The cold hit Mark like a wall the moment he stepped onto the trail. The air was razor sharp, biting at his skin even through layers of winter gear. Snow had settled thick across the ground, untouched except for a faint set of footprints leading deeper into the woods, the same footprints the frightened hiker must have left behind. Mark studied them carefully, then signaled Rex forward. The German shepherd lowered his head, sniffing the trail with focused intensity. The forest around them was unnaturally quiet. No birds, no rustling branches, no distant animal sounds. Just the whisper of wind brushing through the towering pines. The deeper they walked, the more oppressive the silence became. It felt as if the entire forest was holding its breath, waiting. Rex stopped suddenly, ears twitching. His chest expanded with a slow, wary inhale. Mark's hand instinctively went to the flashlight clipped to his vest. He clicked it on, sweeping the beam between the trunks. Snowflakes drifted lazily through the light, sparkling like falling ice crystals. Nothing moved, but Rex was locked onto something Mark couldn't yet see. "Easy," Mark whispered. Though his throat felt tight, he trusted Rex more than any human partner he had ever worked with. If the dog sensed danger, danger was there. They continued walking. Their boots sank into the deep snow with soft, muffled thuds. The trees grew closer together, forming a narrow corridor that forced Mark to maneuver carefully between branches crusted with frost. Every step felt heavier than the last, as if the cold itself was trying to pull him back. Rex tugged the leash again, harder this time. Mark steadied himself. The dog's breathing quickened, vapor puffing rapidly into the frigid air. Something ahead was triggering him. Then Mark saw it. A shape dark, tall, unmoving, stood between the trees in the distance. For a moment, his brain tried to explain it away. A fallen log, a coat someone left behind, a shadow. But Rex growled softly, the sound vibrating through the silent forest. Whatever was waiting ahead. It wasn't natural, and they were getting closer with every step. Mark's breath hitched as he stepped closer, the beam of his flashlight trembling slightly in his hand. The dark shape he'd seen earlier slowly sharpened into something far more disturbing. For a moment, His mind refused to accept what his eyes were showing him. It felt impossible, unreal, like something pulled straight from a nightmare. Rex pulled harder, his growl rising from deep in his chest. Snow crunched beneath their boots as they approached the nearest tree. And then Mark really saw them. 3 German shepherds were tied upright to a thick pine trunk, their bodies bound tightly with coarse rope. Their legs dangled unnaturally, their heads limp, their fur coated in layers of frost. They looked frozen in place, like grim statues carved from ice and suffering. Mark's stomach twisted. No, 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 he whispered under his breath. He'd seen cruelty before, but nothing like this. Not in these numbers. Not in such calculated precision. The dogs' chests were still, their eyes half open, glassy, reflecting the beam of his flashlight, without even a twitch. Snow clung to their whiskers, their ears, their frozen paws. If the collar had been right, if there were more out here. Every passing second mattered. Rex stepped forward cautiously, sniffing the air around the bodies. His posture softened only slightly, but he did not give the distress signal that he would if there was movement. Whatever had happened here, it hadn't happened long ago, but long enough for the cold to take its toll. Mark scanned the immediate area. Rope fibers scattered near the ground. A splintered wooden crate half buried in snow. Footprints multiple sets leading deeper into the trees. This wasn't random. Someone had brought these dogs here. Someone had tied them deliberately. Someone had walked away. Mark swallowed hard, forcing himself to stay focused. Who would do this? He muttered. The forest didn't answer, but a sudden, faint sound behind him did. Rex snapped his head toward the noise, muscles tightening like a coiled spring. A whisper of movement, a breath, a soft, fragile whine. One of the dogs wasn't dead. It was alive. The soft whine sliced through the frozen silence like a blade. Mark froze, his heart lurching. He swung the flashlight back toward the dogs, the beam shaking as his breath quickened. Rex, did you hear that? He whispered. Rex didn't need to answer. The German shepherd surged forward, nearly yanking the leash from Mark's hand. He pressed his nose against the chest of the middle dog, sniffing intensely. His ears shot straight up, tail rigid, body trembling not with fear, but with raw urgency. Rex wasn't wrong. He never was. Mark dropped to one knee, brushing snow away from the dog's muzzle. At first, there was nothing. Then, the faintest puff of warm air fought against Mark's glove. A breath slow, weak, but real. Oh God, you're alive, Mark breathed. He moved to the next dog. Its eyelid twitched barely, but enough to break him inside. These dogs weren't dead. They were freezing to death. Seconds mattered. Minutes could decide whether they lived or slipped away forever. Rex circled the tree in frantic loops, whining louder, pawing at the snow, urging Mark to hurry. It was the most emotional Mark had ever seen him, no longer a trained canine following procedure, but a loyal soul desperate to save his own kind. Mark unclipped his radio. This is Officer Dalton, code red. I have multiple living dogs in critical condition. We need emergency teams immediately. Repeat, immediately. His voice cracked with urgency. The forest remained silent, snow drifting gently like falling ash around them. Mark's hands worked quickly, tugging at the frozen knots in the rope. His fingers numbed instantly, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. The dog's shallow breaths grew weaker with every gust of icy wind. Stay with me, he whispered to the trembling shepherd. Holding its head gently. Rex pressed his body close to one of the dogs, offering warmth. Instincts taking over. His breath fogged the air as he let out a soft, distressed whimper. In that moment, Mark understood something chilling. Whoever tied these dogs here didn't want them found alive. And somewhere deeper in the woods, more waited. Mark's fingers shook as he pressed the radio button again, his breath clouding the icy air. Dispatch. This is Officer Dalton. I need immediate rescue units, veterinary response, and additional officers at my coordinates. Multiple dogs alive but in critical condition. Temperature is dropping fast. We don't have long. Static crackled, followed by dispatch's startled reply. Copy, Dalton. Units are en route. Stay safe. Stay safe. The phrase felt hollow out here. Mark glanced at the sky. Heavy gray clouds gathered like a closing curtain, threatening another brutal snowstorm. If backup didn't arrive soon, these dogs wouldn't survive another hour, maybe not even half. Rex barked sharply, snapping Mark back into focus. The canine darted between the 3 tied shepherds, whining desperately, pushing his nose into their frozen fur as if begging them to hold on. He looked at Mark, eyes wide, pleading. I know, buddy. I'm trying, Mark whispered. He pulled off his outer jacket and wrapped it around the weakest dog, shielding it from the cutting wind. The animal's chest rose, barely lifting, and then fell again with a trembling shudder. Mark leaned down, listening. Its breathing was slowing. Stay with me. Please stay with me, he murmured. The wind roared suddenly, sending waves of snow sweeping across the forest floor. Mark shielded his eyes, cursing under his breath. With temperatures this low, every second felt like a countdown. He forced his frozen fingers to work faster, sawing a pocket knife through the rope fibers. The thick strands resisted, stiffened by ice. Finally, they snapped. The dog sagged forward into Mark's arms, limp but alive. Rex barked again, this time not in panic. A warning. Mark spun toward the sound. More shapes, silhouettes, deeper in the trees. Were those more dogs? Or something else? His radio crackled again. Dalton, ETA 15 minutes. 15 minutes. Too long. Way too long. Mark swallowed hard. Copy, he said, voice tight. I'm going in deeper to locate the rest. And as he clipped Rex's leash, one cold, undeniable truth hit him. Whoever did this wasn't just cruel, they were still out there. Rex moved first. The German Shepherd lunged toward the dark silhouettes deeper in the forest, pulling Mark with such force that snow sprayed behind them. Mark steadied himself, raised his flashlight, and followed the dog's urgent pace. The beam cut through the trees, and what it revealed made Mark's breath seize in his throat. Another group. For more German Shepherds, tied upright, bound in the same cruel formation. Their bodies were pressed against the trees by thick ropes, paws dangling inches above the snow. Their fur was stiff with ice, their faces frozen mid-expression, fear, pain, confusion. The sight was so monstrous it didn't seem humanly possible. Oh my God, Mark whispered, voice cracking. Rex whimpered, circling them, sniffing frantically, his posture rigid but terrified, as if even he couldn't comprehend how someone could do this to his own kind. Mark approached slowly, flashlight trembling in his grip. He leaned in close to the first dog and pressed his fingers under its jaw. Nothing. He moved to the second. Nothing. The third, a twitch. Mark jerked back. Wait, this one's breathing. He leaned in again, this time pressing his ear gently against the dog's chest. A faint, rhythmic thump pulsed beneath layers of frozen fur, slow but steady. You're a fighter, Mark whispered. He turned toward the others. Rex, check them. Rex obeyed immediately, sniffing each one with precision. After a moment, he gave a small, hopeful bark. Too alive. To gone. Mark clenched his jaw. Whoever did this wasn't just abandoning dogs, they were selecting them, testing them, torturing them, and leaving them to die in a methodical line, tree by tree. His radio buzzed again. Dalton, blizzard warning issued. Ground teams delayed. Mark looked at the dogs, shivering, gasping, clinging to life, and felt anger burn through the cold. No, he muttered. I'm not waiting. He pulled off another jacket layer, wrapping it around the weakest survivor. His fingers stung as he worked through the frozen knots, but he kept going. Rex barked sharply again, alert, tense. Mark stood and listened. Somewhere ahead, a distant metallic clang echoed through the woods. Not the wind, not the trees. Someone else was out there. Mark knelt beside the second group of German Shepherds, his flashlight trembling as he examined their bodies more closely. The ice coating their fur was thick enough to crack when he touched it, but beneath that frozen shell were the unmistakable marks of human cruelty. Deep rope burns carved into their legs and chest, patches of fur ripped out, bruising beneath the skin, painful evidence that these dogs hadn't simply been abandoned. They had been restrained violently. Rex paced anxiously around them, nose darting from one injury to the next. His low whine echoed through the trees like a grieving cry. Mark had never heard him sound like that before, broken, angry, helpless. It chilled him more than the snow ever could. Mark swallowed hard, forcing himself to move from one dog to the next. On the ground near their paws, he noticed something half buried in the snow. A torn piece of fabric. He picked it up. It was from a jacket. Thick material, expensive, and smeared with dirt and blood. Someone had struggled here. Someone had fought these dogs. But why? He scanned the immediate area again, his beam catching faint scratch marks on a nearby tree trunk. Long, deep grooves too deliberate to be from animals. They looked almost like tally marks, as if someone had been counting. Rex suddenly growled at a metal chain lying frozen beneath the snow. Mark reached down and lifted it. It wasn't a simple chain, it was part of a heavy-duty dog training collar, the kind used by professional handlers. The realization hit him like a punch. These dogs weren't just pets, he whispered. They were trained dogs. Multiple locations. Systematic torture. This wasn't random. This was organized. Mark stood slowly, fear and anger twisting inside him. He looked out into the dark maze of trees stretching ahead. Whoever had done this had experience, access, and no conscience at all. A gust of wind howled through the forest, lifting loose snow and swirling ghost. Rex stiffened, ears straight, posture locked onto something deeper in the woods. Mark tightened his grip on the flashlight. More signs of cruelty awaited them, and maybe the monster behind it. Rex led the way now, nose buried deep in the snow as he followed an invisible path only he could detect. Mark didn't question it. When Rex locked onto his scent, there was always a reason. The dog pulled hard, dragging Mark deeper into the frozen maze of trees, where the air felt colder and the silence thicker, like the forest itself was listening. A few yards ahead, the snow thinned, revealing patches of churned earth. Mark crouched beside the disturbed ground. There were footprints, several sets, some small, some large, heading in the same direction. He brushed away more snow and uncovered a deeper depression in the soil, shaped like the heel of a heavy boot. Not just one person, Mark murmured. At least two, maybe three. Rex barked once, sharply, drawing Mark's attention to a cluster of broken branches overhead. They weren't snapped by weather, they were ripped downward, fresh and splintered. Someone had forced their way through here recently, and judging by the height of the breaks, they'd been carrying something heavy. Mark moved carefully, scanning every inch of the ground. That's when he spotted it, faint drag marks in the snow. Long lines, uneven, leading away from the area where the second group of dogs had been tied. He followed them with his flashlight, heart tightening with dread. Were they dragging cages? He whispered. A glint caught his eye. Half buried in the frost was a metal bolt, thick, industrial grade, the kind used for securing crates. Mark pocketed it and moved on. Rex suddenly stopped, ears flattening, body lowering into a defensive crouch. He sniffed the air, then looked back at Mark with a deep, uncertain whine. Mark lifted his light and scanned ahead. There between narrow pines was a strange clearing, circular, perfectly smooth. Snow had been shoveled away to reveal compacted dirt. In the center lay blackened wood and ashes. A fire pit, recently used. The edges were warm. Not hot but warm. Mark's pulse spiked. Whoever had tortured these dogs had been here less than an hour ago, and they might still be close. Mark circled the fire pit slowly, scanning every inch with the intensity of a crime scene investigator. Whoever had been here didn't stay long, but they weren't careful either. Burned scraps of fabric, broken zip ties, and a few crack sticks lay scattered around the ashes. But then something caught Rex's attention, something metallic. The canine pawed at the snow near the edge of the clearing, ears perked, tail stiff. Mark rushed over, brushing aside the frost. A small metal object glinted beneath a thin layer of ice. He picked it up carefully. A tag, rectangular, heavy, cold. Not a dog tag, something else. Mark turned it over. On one side, a logo had been etched, a shield with a lightning bolt through it. On the other side, numbers were scratched so deeply the metal curved inward. But most of the text had been violently filed off, leaving only a few letters visible. TRN, K9, FAC. Mark's stomach tightened. Training facility? He whispered. Rex sniffed the tag and let out a low, angry growl, the same growl he used during narcotics raids or when he sensed a threat. This is from a kennel or professional handler, Mark murmured. Someone with experience. Someone who knew exactly what they were doing. He stood, scanning the trees again. The evidence kept pointing toward organization, precision, knowledge. These weren't random acts of cruelty. This was systematic. As Mark stepped back, something else gleamed faintly in the snow. He crouched again and lifted a thin metal chain, broken, cold, and smeared with dried blood. It matched the chain he found earlier, confirming the same owner. The same setup. The same monster. Rex barked suddenly, jerking Mark's attention to a tree trunk a few feet away. Mark approached and found a second metal tag nailed into the bark. This one wasn't burned or filed, it was intact. MK9 Tactical Training Unit, a private facility. One that had shut down years ago, after animal abuse allegations. Mark exhaled shakily. So you're back, he whispered into the cold. The woods around him seemed to tighten. Whoever ran that facility had returned to their old methods, and they weren't finished yet. Rex's nose hit the ground again, pulling Mark away from the tree and deeper into the dark corridor between the pines. The air grew heavier, colder, as if the forest itself was trying to warn them not to proceed. But the trail was fresh to fresh. Whoever had been here couldn't be far ahead. Mark's boots crunched through the snow as he followed the drag marks. They were clearer now, slicing a path through the forest floor. Something heavy had been dragged through here, cages, equipment, or perhaps more dogs. Every step tightened the knot in his stomach. Rex stopped suddenly, lifting his head high. His breath puffed in short, sharp bursts, alert, focused, determined. Mark narrowed his eyes, scanning the area. There were more footprints now, overlapping in chaotic patterns. Two individuals for sure, maybe more. Up ahead, a faint glow flickered between branches. Mark tensed, a light. Someone was still out here. He crouched low, pulling Rex close. moving in silence. He edged forward until the source became clear. A lantern hung on a crooked nail outside a decaying wooden structure. The cabin was old, abandoned-looking, with boards missing from the walls and snow piled up against the broken windows. But the footprints leading straight to the door told a different story. This is where they went, Mark whispered. Rex growled softly, for bristling along his spine. Mark approached slowly, circling the structure to examine its perimeter. Frozen buckets, rusted tools, and piles of wood scraps lay scattered around. Beneath the tarp, he spotted something chilling, a metal crate large enough to hold several dogs. Fresh claw marks scored its sides. Whatever had been inside fought desperately to escape. Mark swallowed hard. This place was used recently. He lifted the tarp fully. More crates, some empty, some with locks broken from the inside. Others, still sealed. Rex whined, pawing at one of the crates with frantic urgency. Mark pressed his ear to it. A faint scratching came from inside. Someone had taken these dogs here, and at least one was still alive. Mark's pulse hammered as he unlatched the crate. The metal hinges groaned, stiff with cold, and the moment the door cracked open, a trembling German shepherd collapsed into his arms. The dog was skin and bone, shaking violently, its eyes wide with the kind of fear that only comes from long, brutal suffering. Rex immediately leaned in, sniffing gently, offering comfort in a way only another dog could. The rescued shepherd whimpered and buried its head against Mark's chest. "That's it. You're safe now," Mark whispered, lowering it carefully onto his jacket. But as he stood, his flashlight drifted across the inside of the cabin and his breath caught in his throat. Rows of cages lined the walls, large, medium, and small. Some stacked on top of each other, some broken open, some still locked. Grimy water bowls sat frozen solid, untouched. The floor was littered with torn leashes, filthy blankets, empty syringes, and shredded documents. The stench of fear, urine, and decay lingered like a heavy cloud. Rex growled, low and furious. Mark stepped deeper inside. In the center of the room, he found a table covered in paperwork, breeding charts, medical test logs, vaccination cards, ownership transfer forms. He lifted one sheet and felt his stomach twist. They weren't just breeding dogs. They were breeding German shepherds specifically designed for high-level working role security, guarding, even illegal fighting circuits. Every dog in this place had a number, not a name. A number. "This is a full operation," Mark muttered. "Not just abandonment, not just cruelty. This is business." He opened another folder. Invoices, shipments, international buyers. Exports. Someone was making serious money off these dogs, and when the operation collapsed, they tried to erase the evidence by killing the animals. Rex barked sharply at a locked door in the back. Mark rushed over and forced it open with his shoulder. Inside were more cages, smaller ones. Puppy crates, empty, except for a single collar lying in the center, snapped clean in half. Mark swallowed hard. Someone had been here recently, and they took the puppies with them. Mark stepped back from the empty puppy crates, the cold settling deeper into his bones. Whoever ran this operation didn't just abandon dogs, they stole their futures, their sanity, their lives. And the fact that the smallest crates were empty meant only one thing. Someone escaped with the puppies before Mark arrived. Rex began pacing, nose lifted high as he searched the air for a scent. His tail stiffened and he growled toward the cabin doorway. Mark immediately followed his line of sight. Footprints, fresh ones, deep impressions in the snow, leading away from the cabin. One set heavier, dragging. The other lighter, hurried. Someone had left moments before they arrived. Mark motioned for Rex to track it. The canine bounded forward, pulling Mark into the thick forest once again. The prints wove between the trees, circling around a boulder before heading toward a narrow trail that sloped downhill. As they moved, something caught Mark's eye. Shredded pieces of leather scattered along the path. A glove, torn apart, teeth marks embedded deep into it. One of the dogs had fought back. The trail opened into a small clearing, and there, half buried in snow, lay a worn-out jacket. Mark knelt beside it, flipping it over. The inside label froze his breath midair. MK-9 Tactical Training Uni Lead Instructor, Carl Wexler. Mark's blood ran cold. Carl Wexler, a name he hadn't heard in years. A man who once trained elite K9 South before his license was revoked for abuse, neglect, and illegal sales. He'd vanished after the scandal. No charges stuck. No paper trail, nothing. The man had disappeared like smoke. Until now. Rex sniffed the jacket, barking furiously. His fur bristled. He remembered the scent. He recognized it. That meant Wexler had been near the dogs recently. Maybe minutes ago. Maybe seconds. "Wexler," Mark whispered, gripping the fabric. "You're behind this." The forest around them creaked, groaned. and shifted under the weight of falling snow. A cold wind swept through the clearing, carrying a faint sound of branch snapping. Rex snapped his head toward it. Mark reached for his flashlight. Wexler wasn't gone. He was still here. The moment Mark radioed in the discovery of the cabin, the forest erupted with distant sirens and flashing lights weaving through the trees. Rescue teams, veterinary units, and additional officers trudged through the snow toward the scene. Mark stood outside the cabin with Rex at his side, watching as the first responders hurried in. The surviving German Shepherd Mark had freed earlier let out a weak cry as a medic knelt beside it. Severe hypothermia, dehydration, malnutrition, the medic reported quickly. We need to get them warm now. He lifted the trembling dog into a thermal blanket, and rescuers rushed it toward the vehicle. Rex followed them with worried eyes, whining softly. Mark placed a hand on his partner's head. They're in good hands now, he whispered. Soon. Officers began carrying out the other surviving dogs discovered in the forest. Some were barely conscious. Some blinked sluggishly at the lights. Others tried to lift their heads, recognizing the gentle touch of the rescuers. Each dog's fragile attempt to respond made Mark's chest tighten. A veterinarian knelt next to a younger shepherd whose legs were stiff with frostbite. She's strong, the vet murmured, stroking the dog's frozen ear. If we get her to the clinic fast, she has a chance. The dog's tail twitched once weak, but alive. Mark felt a wave of relief wash over him. These dogs had endured unthinkable cruelty, yet their will to survive was astonishing. Even after everything, they still responded to kindness. Rex walked slowly from dog to dog, touching noses with each one, as if reassuring them. Some lifted their heads to him with faint recognition, seeking the warmth of another shepherd. Rex lingered beside every survivor, offering silent comfort. Truck after truck filled with rescued dogs began pulling away toward the emergency animal hospital. Steam rose from their exhaust, lights cutting through the swirling snow. As the last vehicle door closed, Mark exhaled. They had saved 9 lives today, 9 souls snatched back from the edge of death. But the battle wasn't over, because somewhere in this forest, the man who'd caused all this suffering was still out there. And Mark was going to find him. By the next morning, the story had erupted far beyond the quiet edges of the frozen forest. What began as a single distress call from a terrified hiker had transformed into a national headline. News vans crowded the entrance of the hospital where the rescued German shepherds were being treated. Reporters bundled in heavy coats for the cold as they delivered live updates, their breath turning white in the frigid air. 10 German shepherds found tied in a remote forest. A suspected illegal breeding operation. Authorities call it one of the worst cruelty cases in recent years. Community outrage surges as police launch a manhunt for the suspect. The clips played nonstop across every major network. Inside the hospital, veterinarians worked around the clock. Images of the recovering dogs spread on social media, bandaged legs, warming blankets, gentle eyes blinking weakly at the camera. Thousands of people commented, sharing prayers, sending donations, begging for updates. Offers to adopt the survivors poured in from every corner of the country. Mark stood in the hallway outside the treatment rooms, watching the news coverage from a mounted TV. His name flashed across the screen, Officer Mark Dalton, the first responder who discovered the dogs. But he didn't care about attention. His eyes stayed fixed on the images of the shepherds alive, breathing, fighting, because that was what mattered most. Rex sat beside him, tail thumping softly whenever a picture of the rescued dogs appeared. He had visited each one, checking on them like an older brother, making sure his family was safe. Nurses smiled every time he walked through the hallways, calling him the hero dog. Yet even as the nation rallied behind the survivors, the coverage ignited something darker: anger. Pure outrage. People demanded justice. Volunteers formed search groups. Anonymous tips poured into the station so rapidly that dispatch had to open a separate line. Someone out there knew something. Someone had seen Carl Wexler, and the public was determined to help catch him. Mark stepped away from the TV, determination sharpening inside him. The world was watching now. Wexler wasn't just a local threat anymore, he was a national target. And Mark intended to end this before he hurt another living soul. Snow fell in thick, heavy curtains as Mark and Rex pushed deeper into the woods. Following the last confirmed sighting of Carl Wexler, a civilian had spotted a man matching his description limping toward an abandoned service road just before dawn. By the time Mark arrived, the footprints were already half buried. But Rex didn't need perfect tracks, he needed a scent. And he found it instantly. The trail led to a narrow ridge overlooking a frozen ravine. There, hunched beneath a twisted pine, was Wexler. His clothes were torn, his face pale, his breath coming out in ragged bursts. When he heard Mark approaching, he didn't run. He simply lowered his head, as if he already knew the chase was over. Mark raised his flashlight, the beam slicing through the snowfall. Carl Wexler, he called out. Stand up, slowly. Wexler lifted his hands. They shook. You're too late, he rasped. They were all supposed to be gone. Rex growled, stepping forward, but Mark held him back. Wexler sank onto the snow. I trained those dogs, he said, voice trembling. All of them. Best I ever bred. But when my facility shut down, those investors, they wanted results. They wanted proof the line was still strong. When I couldn't give it, his voice cracked. They ordered everything destroyed. Every dog. Every pup. Evidence erased. Mark felt rage burn through him. So you hung them? Left them to die? Wexler shook his head violently. No. I was supposed to. But I couldn't do it. His eyes glistened. I tried to save the strong ones. Hide them. Move them before anyone found out. But the storm hit. I ran out of time. The truth hit Mark like a blow. Wexler wasn't killing the dogs. He was trying clumsily, desperately to save them from the people who had ordered their deaths. Sirens echoed through the forest as backup arrived. Officers cuffed Wexler gently and he didn't resist. Mark watched him taken away, Rex at his side. Snow swirled around them like falling ash. The surviving dogs would live. The truth was out, and a nation would never forget what happened in those frozen woods.